I hereby call this meeting to order. And now please stand and join me in our pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you have not done so recently, please be sure to visit the Economic Club of Florida's website. We are continually updating it and making improvements. You'll find links to the club's YouTube page for video. You can listen to past speaker programs, and you can access podcasts of former speaker presentations. We also include the speaker schedule, which I'm pleased to say extends now out to the end of this calendar year. We have every month booked. You can find us, Economic Club of Florida, on LinkedIn, updates on Twitter, and somewhat on Instagram. We're not quite up on that, but we're close. LinkedIn is going to be your best source to see us, and I would suggest that photos may go up as early as this afternoon or as late as tomorrow morning. Speaking of our electronic, our audio, and generally speaking, all things audiovisual, you may know that for several years, the Economic Club of Florida has trusted Joel Silver Productions, Joel Digital Media, with our cameras, our recording, and all of our video and audio. Joel and his team are here with us today. We've just reached a 2-year deal with Joel to continue with his work. I want to say thank you very much and give you a round of applause, please. In a true partnership. We have an amazing program for you today. Our main speaker, as you know, is Dr. Jerry Parrish, an economist currently working with Florida Institute of Government at Florida State University. We'll introduce him in a few moments. I now want to talk with you about next month's speaker, so you'll know that we have Thursday, August 25, booked for the next speaker. The speaker will be self-made multimillionaire Freddie Figures. Freddie has an amazing story, an amazing life story, and you won't want to miss it. The August 25 luncheon will be back at our usual location at the FSU Alumni Center. So just set your Tesla on autopilot and just cruise back to where we usually meet. I'd now like to recognize and to thank our trustee members. Our club's trustee members provide additional financial support to the club each year, and in turn, they receive some exclusive benefits, such as meeting and interacting with our in-person speakers. They had a pre-meeting huddle today with Dr. Parrish, got to ask him personal questions, and for each of the live speakers, we do offer that reception prior to the meetings. One more item, I want to report to the trustees that the board is scheduling a trustee reception, an invitation to new prospective members, which will be Tuesday, September 13 at the Governor's Club. As a trustee, we thank you. Could the trustees please stand and get a round of applause? Thank you very much for your support. I'm pleased to report we have a number of guests with us today. Welcome to all guests. As part of a special invitation to the FSU School of Business, we have some extraordinary guests. If you could hold your applause till we introduce all of them. I'm going to list them, and if I get your name wrong, I apologize in advance. Dean Tim Chapin, Dean of College and Social Sciences. Dean. We have Jeff Hendry, Executive Director of FSU Institute of Government. Jeff. Dr. Katie Sharon, Director of the MS in Applied Economics program. Dr. Harrod. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Carl Kitchens, Associate Professor in MS in Applied Economics program. He's here too. Thank you for joining us today. And John Hammond. Dr. Hammond, are you here? Oh, great, thank you. All right, other guests today. Any guests at Marion, your table? You did it already. All right, thank you. Any guests over to my left? Any guests? Paul? Thank you for being here. Thank you. Any other guests in the back? No? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Any guests? No? Any guests? Any other? Yes, Barney?
Yes. My guest is Matt Mower with Florida Power Light, who just became a member today and trustee.
A double congrats. Thank you.
I'm Allison Chase with the Able Trust.
Thank you. Any others over here? Yes, sir.
Spencer Hines with Capital City Bank.
Welcome. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I have one.
Go ahead, Brian.
I have one more guest, Don May with Tallahassee National Bank. He's already become a member as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
David Strange with Lanigan Associates and Frank Mercer with Lanigan, and then Lucia Fontella with the Community Foundation.
Wow, 3 guests. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Any others? All right. Thank you all for being here. Most of our guests become members, so it's just know that applications are found on our website. I'd like to introduce the head table. Please hold your applause until I've introduced all of them. Beginning on my far right, your left, please welcome Bruce Bichard. Bruce is a longtime member of the Economic Club. In fact, and I did not know this, Bruce has been with the club from the beginning of the club, 45 years ago. Bruce sent me a very nice email, and I will read parts of it because it's extraordinary. In 1977, Bruce received a phone call from Stan Tate, who said, "Bruce, let's have lunch and talk about starting an economic club, just like the Detroit Economic Club." And after much planning and many lunches with several other active community members, Bruce, Stan Tate, and other founding members were ready to launch the club. Here's the quote. "Our first speaker was Charles Curbo, a close confidant of President Carter. Here we are today, 45 years later, with our 559th speaker and hundreds of members." Extraordinary. Thank you, Bruce. A little bit about Bruce. Bruce received his Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from the University of Florida in 1958. After that, Bruce spent most of his active business career in Tallahassee as a property and casualty insurance broker, including 37 years with J. Smith Lanier and Company before retiring. Bruce is still active in local organizations. Bruce is a member and past president of Tallahassee Lions Club, where he's been a member for 51 years, founder and past president of North Florida Safety Council, which is where I met Bruce many years ago when I was a state court prosecutor. And he's a member and past president of the Tallahassee Apple User Group and president-elect of Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and of course, a lifelong member of our club. Thank you, Bruce, and welcome. Next to Bruce, please welcome Michael Wilson. Our sponsor today is the First Bank. Michael Wilson is a member of the Economic Club, and he is also vice president of private and commercial banking with the First Bank, known as The First. The First is a publicly traded bank under symbol FBMS, and more information available online at thefirstbank.com. In April of 2018, the First acquired Sunshine Community Bank, the local community bank, and then in November of that same year, they acquired Farmers and Merchants Bank. So 2018 was an active year for the bank. Michael joined the predecessor, Sunshine Community Bank, in 2015, and he was placed in charge of, or growing, the bank's presence within the private banking and commercial banking sector. He has 34 years of financial services experience and has been working the Tallahassee market for over 20 years. As sponsor, you will hear him in a few minutes when we introduce him to say a few words to the club about First Bank. On my far left, your right, please welcome Katrina Roll. Katrina is a member of our club's executive committee. She serves as treasurer and is a member of our board of directors. Katrina will introduce our distinguished speaker in a few moments, and I'll give her a longer introduction at that time. And seated next to Katrina is, of course, our distinguished speaker, Dr. Jerry Parrish, Some of you may know Dr. Parrish, and he'll be introduced in a few moments. Seated next to Jerry is Charles Belvin, a member of our club. Let me tell you about Charles. I asked him to tell me a bit about himself. While some of us in the business community expect to receive a biography, something that tells me where he's worked, what he's done. So Charles sent back an overview of his life, kind of a running commentary, starting with his time in grade school at McClay, and then through his somewhat unconventional life. He's the third generation Tallahassean. His work history, he said, he started in college pursuing the arts, all of them, writing, drawing, painting, photography, acting, directing, and then after attending 5 universities, he decided to get a job, which led him to residential contractor, roof and floor system design engineer, that's kind of scary, manager of a roof truss manufacturing plant. And finally, back to the arts. Now he does film and video production. Charles taught himself the necessary skills to pursue this new career path. This is straight from his running bio. He began by producing wedding videos, often for free, in order to build a portfolio, then moving into corporate video, then television production by helping the city of Tallahassee launch WCOT, the first city channel. After winning more than a dozen national first place awards for the city of Tallahassee, Charles moved back into the private sector and spent 6 years working for Sachs Media Group, where he produced a body of work that earned him 4 Suncoast Regional Emmy Awards. In 2008, Charles formed Charles Belvin Productions and is currently engaged in all facets of production, including now animation, 3D. Provides pro bono services to dozens of 501c3 organizations, and he's a member of our club. Thank you for your service to our community in an unusual career. Let's give the head table a round of applause, please. You may recall our club accepts luncheon sponsorships. A sponsor will have their business logo displayed on all pre-luncheon written and electronic materials displayed in our press releases and in our Echo newsletter, which should be on each of your tables and sent to you by email. As a luncheon sponsor, they're allowed a few minutes to speak about the business. It's a great opportunity. Our sponsor today is the First Bank. I'm going to ask Michael Wilson to come up and say a few words about First Bank. Michael, the floor is yours.
Sir. I will be brief. First, I want to recognize and thank Will Davis, our market president, who's in attendance, and Conte Exabuth, the regional retail specialist that keeps our branches in order. Also thank Barney Bishop. Barney invited me to the club last year, and through his tenacity and relentless pursuit, I am now a member. I think I'm 1 year in August. The first was founded in 1995 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi by 7 businessmen who raised $7 million because they had a vision for banking that was different than what they were experiencing in their businesses. As a result of that, today we are now in 5 states. We have expanded our lines of business and our operations from retail, commercial, private banking, and now wealth management through our partnership with the Raymond James affiliate. Why should you join the Economic Club? Because I was asked about the reason that other than Barney. I think it's the quality of the speakers, number one, and the tenacity of the leadership team to get those that are relevant to our current environment. If you look at the last 3 speakers, I think those are perfect. Fuel, cryptocurrency, and the economy. And I think those are basically the areas that everyone is, not only just business owners, but everyone is concerned with today. So I'd like to thank the opportunity. I appreciate the chance to sponsor this and look forward to meeting all of you. If I can help with anything, let me know.
Thank you, Michael. If any of our members are interested in sponsoring a luncheon, please see me or any member of the board. Now the main event. I'd like to introduce Katrina Roll, who will introduce our speaker. Katrina is President and CEO of the Community Foundation of North Florida, one of the region's leading philanthropic organizations. She joined the Community Foundation in October 2019 after serving as the President, CEO of the United Way of the Big Bend from 2015 to 2019. Katrina began her professional career as a cost accountant with a Fortune 500 company. She then worked as a consumer services supervisor for a power utility company before attending law school at University of Florida. This may surprise you all that she is a lawyer in addition to all of her accounting work and working with Community Foundation. She began the legal career in commercial litigation before transitioning into estate planning and probate. She serves our area on several boards: Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare, the University of Florida Foundation, University of Florida's Levin College of Law Trustee Council, Executive Committee, and the Executive Leadership Council for the Tallahassee-Leon County Office of Economic Vitality. She's also a member of both Leadership Florida and Leadership Tallahassee. And as I mentioned, she currently serves as our club's treasurer and is a member of our board of directors. Katrina, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Lau. I consider it a privilege to be able to introduce our speaker today. I have known him for 7 years, and I've had the opportunity to hear him speak on several occasions. I can personally attest to the fact that he is able to take a subject like economics, make it easier to understand, and enable an audience to walk away more informed, and I dare say inspired by the subject. So how is he able to do this? Perhaps it's because he earned a degree in agricultural business and economics from Auburn University. This is certainly something that he's proud of, but as a graduate of the University of Florida, I don't think that's quite it. Perhaps it's because he served 7 years as the chief economist and director of research for the Florida Chamber Foundation. In this role, he was responsible for conducting an in-depth analysis on the Florida economy. I think that might be part of the reason. And Dominic Calabro would add that it's because he spent 4 years as the chief economist and director of the Center for a More Competitive Florida at Florida Tax Watch. And Dominic, I think that's part of it. But I will lift up to you that I also think it's because he is known across the state of Florida as a leading expert on economic trends. And he regularly meets with business and government leaders alike to measure the success of our state and the communities within it. And now he has this title. He gave me his business card. I didn't want to see it because I want to see how this title fits on the card. He is the chief economist and director of state and local policy analysis at the John Scott Daly Florida Institute of Government at Florida State University. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Dr. Jerry Parrish.
Thanks, Katrina, and welcome everyone. Very much honored to be here and speak in front of this group. Y'all, when I look at the list of speakers you guys have had in the past, it's just phenomenal, and just appreciate the opportunity. I want to talk about two Floridas that we have going on right now. We've got two different economies, and it's a very unusual time in Florida. First of all, we've got, I have to turn this on. Oh, it was on. See if this thing is going to work, the clicker. There we go. First of all, we've got open jobs, low unemployment. There's more than 600,000 open jobs in the state of Florida right now. You've seen them all. Help wanted signs almost everywhere you go. You talk to any business person, and in most cases, their number one issue right now is where can I find help? You've also got this situation with Florida's consumers. We just bounced off a low, but we're basically at incredibly long period of time the low consumer sentiment that we have. This Florida consumer sentiment is done by BEBR, the Bureau of Economic and Business Research at the University of Florida. And what we have now is consumer sentiment is lower than what it was during the worst of the pandemic. And, that's really unusual. Almost full employment, people wondering what's going on. Consumer sentiment I watch because that's really an indicator of how people are going to spend their money. And you've heard all over the place that about 70% of the economy is people out there spending money. And so if they have a poor outlook, that's certainly a concern in the future. And that's what we have here in Florida. It's also the same across the country. But how's Florida been doing? Well, Florida actually did pretty well during the pandemic. If you look at this slide, this is the amount of jobs that we have. Florida actually recovered its jobs by October of 2021. And I'll tell you, I'll show you in a minute, not every state has done that. If you're interested in the Tallahassee metro area, we got all our jobs back not until January of this year. So Florida led, the Tallahassee metropolitan area. But it's really interesting because most of the industries are back compared to pre-COVID, but not all of them. This will show you that it's called Education and Health Services is the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics lumps these. That and leisure and hospitality both don't have their job numbers back. So they're still lagging, but others have pulled ahead. And actually, the interesting thing about education and health services, it's actually the health services. We've had a pandemic, yet we've got less health jobs than we did pre-pandemic by a substantial amount. We know a lot of nurses decided to retire early, and a lot of medical people. It's been very, very difficult. Right now, registered nurses is the #1 open job out there in the state of Florida. It has been for a long time. But between registered nurses and LPN nurses, that is a lot of those open jobs that we still have. They're still looking for them. But compared to other states, we've got a couple of different job number series that I use. This is the quarterly census of employment and wages. The last numbers we have is the end of last year. So I looked at December before the pandemic to December of this past year to take a look at that. And Florida is actually number 6 as far as recovery. At that time, 35 other states still don't have all their jobs back. So Florida, at 2.3% positive compared to the U.S. as a whole at minus 0.8. So you can say we're doing well. Actually, workers have been doing well also. This is a series that shows the wages year-over-year increase. It's done by the Atlanta Federal Reserve. I like this series because it tracks the same person over time. And people that have switched jobs, and we know there's been a lot of that because we've had turnover everywhere, their wages are up 7.9% versus 6.1% for the people that stay in their jobs. And, you got to think about that though. Wages are going up, but inflation is going up even faster, right? Matter of fact, what we know from the headlines, and I'm going to show you several headlines here. This says 25% of all the people that were about to retire are rethinking it and going to stay in the job market. That's actually good for the job market because they're the people with experience. They're the ones with the institutional knowledge. And as we all know, turnover is one of the most expensive things that you can do in business. So that lays the groundwork of what's going on out there. Let's talk about recessions a little bit. I've seen in the newspaper, actually responsible newspapers that should know better, say that if we have a negative gross domestic product for 2 quarters in a row, that means we're in a recession. I'm going to say they're wrong. We're in a recession when there's a group of 8 people at the National Bureau of Economic Research say we're in a recession. They're called the Dating Committee. And so they're all powerful. But what we also know is every state doesn't follow exactly the national pattern, right? And one of the cool things I got to do, I know Dominic's here, he's going to take credit for a lot of my success over the past few years. I just expect it, and I would be disappointed if he didn't. But one of the papers I wrote back when I worked for TaxWatch, this is from 2011, talks about the Florida economy going into a recession and the Great Recession compared to the U.S. economy. And what this paper shows is Florida went in the recession earlier, right? we had the big property devaluation. We went earlier than the US. And so what we had in Florida last time, or not the pandemic one, but two recessions ago, the long one, is we went in earlier, stayed later. Ours was twice as long, and on a percentage basis, it was twice as cheap as deep. And that's a really big deal. So what we're sitting here is, the question is Florida heading into a recession? You know, let's think about Florida maybe on a little different path than the US. But what the big issue right now, what's causing a lot of the consumer sentiment issues out there is inflation. And so what we see now is headlines like this. Amid this high inflation, 30-something% of people making $100,000 or more are struggling to get by. We're living paycheck to paycheck. But you think, well, of course, with people in higher incomes, they're not doing that, right? Well, here's another headline from Bloomberg that says a third of the people making $250,000 are struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. Now, as an economist, what does that tell you? That tells you that no matter how much money you give people, some of them are going to spend it all. But what's really important here is who takes the biggest brunt of inflation. And we all know it's people at lower incomes, right? If you're spending all your money on gas and rent and food, there's not much money left for fun stuff. I always tell people, and this is for business people, I know we got a bunch of very distinguished economists here that I actually teach with in the Masters in Applied Economics program. They may not like this, but I always say it this way: the economy runs on fun stuff. If you're buying a motorcycle or a motor home or taking a great vacation or something like that, that's really, really good for the economy, right? So who it hurts though, and if you've heard me speak before, you've probably seen this slide. And probably if you've seen this slide, in the newspaper or anywhere else, you may not have known who made it, but I made it. You've seen a copy of this slide in a lot of places now. This is Leon County. This is the number of kids under 18 living in every zip code in Florida that are living in poverty. And it's a heat map. The darker areas have the highest percentage. And I actually learned how to make these maps when I went to work for the Florida Chamber Foundation. I got this piece of software from FSU, and it's called Tableau, and I didn't know how to use it. So I did what everybody does when they need to learn something. I went onto YouTube and figured out how to do it. And the first map took me about 18 hours to make, and now I can make them in about 5 minutes each. But this is important. We have a community and you've seen a lot of the activity on this. I made these maps for every single county in the state for a couple of years running. And I know they're not being updated now, but I still like to see them because this is where our opportunity is. Long-term economic development depends on helping kids and helping their parents. We help their parents by helping them get job skills, and Florida's actually doing a lot for that. Don't think they're not. I appreciate what they're doing. We also help kids by helping them learn how to read. So another thing you may have seen, and I invented this during COVID, is the Florida Gap Map. Now this is a map I've made. This is a current map of Florida's zip codes with all of our third grade reading scores scattered around it. And you can see, the same exact map, the higher areas with more kids' poverty and their school scores. And I'm not here to shame schools. I will tell you, I showed this to county commissions all over the state and a bunch of people. And I really was disappointed one time when I showed this, and one of the county commissioners held up his hand and said, I see that school over there with only 29% of their kids reading at grade level. And for those of you that don't know why this is so important, third grade's typically where kids go from learning to read to reading to learn. So if kids are comfortable in school, they're more likely to stay in school, they're more likely to graduate. That makes sense, right? And so I had a county commissioner raise his hand and say, this school over here with only 29% of their kids reading at grade level, maybe we should quit giving them tax dollars, and maybe we should quit taxing the parents that send their kids to that school. And I was astounded, and there's somebody here in this room that was there with me when I heard that. And I'm going to tell you, that's a horrible way to judge a school, is their third grade reading score. You don't know if those kids went to school hungry every day, if their parents ever read to them. So when you see this, blame me for the map. I'm the one that did it. All I ask of anybody when I speak in front of them is help a kid learn how to read. Don't wait till they're in 3rd grade. This is long-term economic development. It's especially important in our rural areas. Every time we have an issue, something happened, a pandemic, a hurricane, anything, it hurts 2 groups the worst. And it hurts people in rural areas, and it hurts people that have low incomes. And so anything the business community can do to help them, I absolutely appreciate that. So let's talk about the subject of the day. Is a recession coming? Let's see what people are saying out there in the news. I'm going to show you some more headlines. 70% of Americans believe that we're going into a recession. Is that high or is that low? Well, I should tell you that for a number of years, I have maintained a probability of recession model. I used to put it on the website every single month. And let me tell you how that model and many of the things that I've done over the past few years have happened. I've been teaching since, I think it's 2013 in this Master's in Applied Economics program. I've really enjoyed that. It's been good for me to be around young people because I'm not around that many young people. These kids are the brightest. This program at FSU was ranked top 5 in the country. We got some of the brightest kids out there coming to this. And so what do I look at these grad students and say, hey, this is free labor. Let's get some of the issues of Florida solved. And I tell my students, and they don't like this, I say, listen, you're going to work for the state of Florida when we do this capstone project. I said, we're subsidizing your education. You're going to do some projects, and we're doing those now. We got projects on, rural housing, on attainable workforce housing. We've got Medicaid expansion. We've got, several other things that they're working on, and they do this every single year. Well, one of my groups one year worked on poverty, and one of them did work on poverty, but they've done a lot of things. One of them worked on an index to forecast the probability of recession. So I modified that a little bit and used it the whole time. But here's what everybody thinks. 70% of Americans think we're going into recession. What else is happening out there? Mortgage demand is falling. Lowest in 22 years because of interest rates going up. Home buyers are canceling their contracts, right? You qualified if you didn't lock in your rate, and the rate went up because we had some really steep mortgage rates go up, and some people were no longer qualified, right? That's been going on. Here's something that came out yesterday. There we go. Home builder sentiment plunges in July. So that's a big signal. What are people thinking? Are they scared? Are they too scared to spend money? Well, one of the things we look for as economists, and this is part of my forecasting model, is what's the spread between 2-year and 10-year bonds? Now, some people use 10-year and 3 months. There's a lot of different literature out there. I use 10 years and 2 years, but those things have shown up now. Bonds flash recession warning. And what that happens is the interest rate on a 2-year bond, which should be lower than a 10-year, right? There's a premium, or a time premium here. The 2-year should be cheaper than the 10-year, right? Well, it inverts. That's what's called flattening the yield curve and going negative, if you're familiar with that. And so that signal flashed. Is that saying we're going to have a recession? Well, here's the yield curve inversion, reaches the biggest point since the year 2000. Hey, we've had a lot of stuff happen since 2000, right? So, and here's what it looks like. This is something the Federal Reserve tracks all the time because it is an important indicator. And this is what the chart looks like. It went negative before the last recession. The little gray bar in the middle there is our very short pandemic recession. And so a lot of the time, not every single time, this signals a recession coming on. And so now we're negative. It hit negative a little bit ago, a few weeks ago, and now it's pretty hard negative, and 20 basis points right now as far as what I saw yesterday. So I also get this question, are we in a recession already? People say, wow, the GDP went down in the first quarter, and the Atlanta Fed is forecasting it at 0 for the second quarter. That would mean 2 quarters in a row of negative or non-positive GDP growth. Well, we've got an economist that I actually like to listen to. He's entertaining to me, a guy named Sean Snaith out of UCF. He says we're in a recession the whole year of 2022. So some people think we're already in one. Some people think there's a 70% chance. If you think about a lot of the banks, the big banks, they all have economists. It's a great job for an economist to work at one of these big banks, I would suspect. And a lot of them have 40 and 50%, 60%. I've seen 72% chance of us being in a recession. Now, here's Nomura Bank. They say that we're going to be in one. And they're a lot more specific. It's easy to say we're about to go into a recession if you're an economist. If you want to tell me what quarter it starts and how long and how deep it is, I'm going to give you credit, because that is a fool's errand to do something that far in advance. Your probability of being wrong is close to 100% when you double up like this. But these guys say starting the fourth quarter of this year, the U.S. will be in a recession, and it will last 5 quarters. So, wow, that's pretty ominous, right? So other people are saying, and then the question is, how deep would it be if we go into a recession? Because that really matters, right? Remember the Great Recession, when people were losing their houses, and your neighbor lost their house and had to move, and the bank foreclosed on it, and they lost their truck and their house, and all those things were happening. I mean, it was horrible here in Florida, and we took the brunt of that, right? Big property value run up. What's happening this time? Big property value run up? Different, I hope. But here's a guy that's saying it's going to be longer and deeper than you even believe. So, what are you gonna believe? I'm going to tell you what I think here in a minute, but I'm going to tell you what I'm watching. Here's what's super important for me. Take a look at the U.S. dollar. As interest rates go up, the dollar gets stronger typically, and we've reached parity with the euro. What does that mean for Florida? That means that guy in Chicago who wanted to take his family on vacation may skip Florida this year. He's going to wait until the heat wave is over in London that's going on right now, and Spain and France and other places like that. But, the dollar's strong. International travel is cheaper on a relative basis than coming to Florida. That's a big deal. Are you an importer or an exporter? You import stuff, pretty good. Hey, dollar's strong, we can buy more stuff for the same amount of money. You're exporting, wow, you may not be competitive anymore because the dollar is so strong. And that is a big issue, and that has long-term consequences. One of the things that we have to think about, the part of the reason the dollar's going up is U.S. economy's doing well compared to the world. Interest rates up. This is something we have to think about, though. This is the Fed's balance sheet. What happens in the recession, and it happens before, when we go into a recession, loosely, the government prints money and the Fed buys bonds with it. You buy bonds, the interest rate goes down, right? Ben Watkins is here. He can explain this a lot better than me. But that's how you keep interest rates low and keep the economy going. Economy's liquid, people got money, you send them checks, everybody has money, kind of keeps things going until things get better, right? Well, now the Fed's got $8.9 trillion on the books. Some of them are mortgage-backed securities, some of them are government securities, but now what they're doing is unwinding those. They start selling those bonds, what they said they were doing, in June. They sell $120 billion a month. Guess what? Price of bonds goes down, interest rates go up. So they're raising the short-term rates. You see the federal funds rate. The long-term rates are going up, and that has a big effect on the dollar. It has effect on the ability of people to buy houses, especially in this short supply situation. And is it a good thing? It certainly damps down demand, but you got to remember, this economy, we've got a shortage of supply is a lot of it. So it's a supply side issue as well as demand. So another thing I look at, and this is super important, I'm going to ask you a question. This is natural gas prices. How many of you and your families or your businesses are dependent on natural gas? I actually want to see you raise your hand. Wow, y'all are a lot smarter than most groups I speak to. I spoke to a group not long ago, and about 4 people out of 150 raised their hand. And I asked them this. I said, do you guys have this newfangled invention in your house or your business that's called electricity? 70% of Florida's electricity is generated by natural gas, right? We told the power companies to do it. It's like, hey, let's don't burn coal anymore. Let's burn something. And hey, natural gas was cheap. Natural gas had been $2 to $4 for a long, long time. Wow, what happened when it hit 9? What's happening to your power bill? It's going up. You know, there's an energy surcharge. It's much more important than that. You know, I've got an agriculture background. I think about what it's doing to fertilizer prices. I actually have a farm up in Alabama. I have a tenant that farms it for me. Fertilizer prices for nitrogen last year, which you required to grow corn, $300 a ton. Over $1,000 this year. Chemicals up. So our fertilizer prices are going up, your electricity going up, food prices are going up. We got a drought out west. People are selling their cattle and putting them on the market now. They'll give us a temporary reprieve, but food prices are going to go up. That's very, very difficult for any economy to withstand. Because remember, if you're spending all your money on necessities and there's not money left over for fun stuff, that's not good for the economy. Now I'm going to tell you, I've got one last slide to show you, and I'm almost on time here. Here's my estimate of what's about to happen in Florida. What my model tells me is, and you know, it's imperfect, could be wrong. First of all, let me be clear. We don't have to go into a recession. It's not mandatory that we go into one. Things could happen. You know, a lot of good stuff could happen. We could avoid it. We could have that soft landing that we all want. However, to choke out inflation, you know, that is a very, very thin path that the Fed has to walk to get interest rates up high enough to kill inflation, but not kill the economy. My take on it is we are going to go into a recession, and here's why. Got to thank the Wall Street Journal. This is their chart. I ripped it off. I'm going to give them credit for it. This shows consumer sentiment and how it drops every single time very hard and very quickly right before we have a recession. So assuming we do have one, that's actually going to be doing it. People cut back on their spending, cut back on investing, and just wait and sit on their money. Even though, you know, their money is becoming less and less because of inflation, a lot of people, rather than put it out at risk, will hold on to it and wait until this thing's over. So my guess is a pretty high probability. You know, the model says about 67% right now for me. You know, could be, you know, literally could be higher than that coming in late this year. But, you know, you got to understand Florida, remember, before COVID, we were growing jobs at more than 1 out of every 11 jobs in this country. Florida's become a dynamic place. Now that you can work from anywhere, people can move to Florida, get a direct flight to wherever they have to go to for most cases, except Tallahassee. And we're getting people moving in here. They're moving out, revitalizing our rural communities, which is great because what happens is when people leave rural communities, the people with opportunity leave. The ones that are left paying the bills. And they're the ones that can't leave or don't have opportunity or don't have skills. So if we do go into a recession, Florida will weather it better than the U.S. But right now, the odds are that the U.S. will go into a recession. I don't believe we're in one now. I can't imagine the NBER dating group saying that we're going to be in a recession when we've got such strong job growth and job openings right here. But anyway, that's what I had for you today. I absolutely appreciate you letting me come to speak to you today. Thanks for coming.
So Jerry has agreed to take a few questions from members. We do not have a mic, so you either speak loudly where you are or come forward to the center and ask your question. Yes, sir. Come on forward.
Hey, Jerry, thank you very much for that plug. Appreciate it. I remember J.E. Davis, when Dixie would tell me as a young kid, as these and listening to him, he'd say that recessions are good from time to time, as long as they're not depressions, because it helps to kind of like fire in a forest, you know, if it's a controlled fire. Tell us a little bit about some of the good that might occur by some recessionary pressures, dampening this excessive phenomenal growth in housing prices and other things that are just simply unsustainable. Thanks.
That's a great question, Dominic. If you didn't hear that, Dominic's looking for the good in a recession, and there are good things. You know, as an economist, you always see the good as well as the bad. And what it would do for us, I believe, is it would take a lot of the inflationary pressure off of us. You know, when people start to cut back, you know, these, you know, increases year over year are just incredible. It also gives people an opportunity to get stuff that they want, you know, whether it's, you know, when the economy, you know, I mean, who's actually tried to buy a car or a truck here in the last few months? You know, it will give the supply chain an opportunity to catch up with what's going on. And it also is got some innovation aspect to it, because a lot of people, once the layoffs come, and there's some starting, you know, in some of the tech businesses and hiring slowdowns and things like that, some people will choose to create their own business and create their own job. And, you know, one of the jobs I also have is I work with Florida Small Business Development Center. I also work with Able Trust. I work with a lot of different groups. You know, if I was talking to the Small Business Development Center, you know, it's like, wow, here's an opportunity for more people to create businesses, to create generational wealth for their families. And, you know, in a recession, when buildings are easier to find, labor's easier to find, you know, commodities that you're needing for your business are less expensive, you know, that's often a great time to start a business. Thanks, Dominic. Good question.
We got a gentleman over there.
Okay.
I'm not Denver, sorry.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Dr. Parrish, thank you for your presentation today. What percentage of the inflation is caused by these higher energy prices? What percent of the CPI is made up of energy, and what can we do about these high energy prices?
That's a great question. If you didn't hear that, you know, what percentage of our inflation is coming from energy prices? I saw a report not long ago that said about 32%. I don't know if that number's still good, but it's only a month or so since I've seen that. There may be somebody here, Dave Micah could probably tell us what the number is, but probably about a third. But remember, that's the direct part. The indirect part that feeds into food prices and chemical prices and fertilizer prices and all those stuff will not end up in that metric when they split out energy direct. So honestly, it could be in the 40%. That's probably a reasonable number right now. You know, one of the things when you're talking about energy prices is, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for people to be more efficient, you know, with whatever they're doing, and we see it in, you know, more insulation in your homes, and, you know, turn into LED lighting and those kind of things for the electricity side. For the fuel side of it, you know, I think one of the great things that's happening here is this work from home. You know, it's been great for workers too. If you've got a job where you can work from home, you've got more power in the labor market than you've ever had in your life, right? Because, you know, think about this, and I tell this a lot. People that are running companies are my age. 61 years old, proud to admit that I've made it this long. Typically, people like me want to see your car in the parking lot when you show up, when they show up for work, and your car's still in the parking lot, you know, when they leave to go home at night. And now we've had to change. People have had to understand you can be productive from home if you have one of those jobs. Keeping a lot of people off of the road. Maybe they can come in a couple of days a week instead of 5. That cuts down on traffic, that cuts down on emissions, that cuts down on fuel usage, those kind of things. You know, with technology, now that we can monitor people and communicate and collaborate with people, that's been a big help. And I think that's one of the things that we'll see more of.
Back in the corner. Yes, sir.
So, Dr. Parrish, question, your slide about inflation driving people staying in the workforce, anecdotally, since I'm a planner, what I'm seeing is what they're looking at is the high cost of health insurance. And people are delaying
Great question, Alan. Alan talked about, the cost of healthcare, driving people to stay around till at least 65 so they can get Medicare. You're absolutely right. That's something that I figured into my calculation. It's like, how long do I want to work? I think it's probably on everybody's mind that's getting to retirement age, that health insurance is super expensive. It's super expensive for employers as well, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about that when you're employed as part of your compensation, yet it's a big, big part. And until you lose it, you're probably not going to think about it until that first COBRA statement comes in, and then you're going to be shocked and wish you'd have gone, and maybe that's in the calculation here too. A lot of people staying in the workforce. Good question.
All right.
Sammy, got one. Last one, Sammy, you got it.
Thank you. Tips right now, 2 10s are 19 basis points apart, negative. Why, with the tightening of the balance sheet of the Fed raising interest rates, why won't the long end of the curve go up?
That's a great question. Why won't the long end of the 10-year and longer go up? That's a great question because the Federal Reserve really controls the short end, right? 30 days, overnight, those kind of things, they have control. The market controls the 10-year and longer. So the market's telling you that it's going to be more expensive to borrow money. And the way I try to explain this to business people, non-economists, once again, very simplified, is think about the demand for money. Companies out there, are they making those long-term plans, borrowing money long-term? If enough of them are doing it, the long end, interest rates will actually go up. It's supply and demand, very, very simple. Obviously, it's a lot more complex than that. But when you think about the market controlling the long end, long duration bonds, long duration everything, the market is who's loaning you that money at 6% now to buy a house instead of 3 point something like it was a couple of years ago. It's not the Federal Reserve, even though they do have an influence. The market says we're not borrowing money to make big capital investments right now or other long-term things. We're a little afraid. We're going to sit out on the sidelines and wait and see what happens. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Jerry, thank you. Round of applause for Jerry. Jerry, move back up, please.
Okay.
So the good news is if you come to the August 25 meeting, you can ask Jerry more questions because he's a member of our club, so you'll see him. So Jerry, I'd like to give to you on behalf of the club this inscribed vase, and I will tell you it's 2 pieces.
Okay.
So
Good to know.
Good. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're adjourned. Thank you all. We're going to do a photo of everybody, including you. Oh, you can't escape us.